big shift that made the Attitude Era, which was the Montreal incident. And we've all, everybody's heard about it, what it was, read all the perspectives and all that. But what I don't think everybody's heard is maybe from you two where you, so you're obviously at ringside, you're calling the match.
I'm in ringside. I'm also the head of talent relations, meaning that if there are any major issues of how this fallout went, I've got to hear all of it from the talent because they want to know why. Why were we betrayed? Why was there's mistrust here? Why were we duped in this whole thing? Did you know what the finish is going to be? All these things. So I had to have that same conversation with 25 or 30 guys, and we had guys that wanted to go home. They wanted to quit. So all you can do is
Mick did. I had to be the one to talk him into coming back.
He quit
2 days later, he missed the first TV.
Yeah, missed a couple of days there, but nonetheless. I didn't, I'm out there with Lawler. Here's the thing, like I mentioned earlier. Lawler and I did our best work when we didn't know the finishes. I've had people that they believe I'm lying, and I don't really care. You believe what you want to believe. That's your prerogative. I didn't have any, when Foley went off the Hell in a Cell in 97 or 98 I think it might have been.
98.
There's somebody here got a shirt on with that Foley shirt. I think, my God, they killed him or something, whatever it says. Yeah, that's it. So I just think that, I knew that when we went out there, it wasn't a big deal. It was a whole pay-per-view to do. In other words, when you are broadcasting a pay-per-view like we're going to do tomorrow night, it's not about one match. It's about one match. When you get to the last match, it's about one match. You with me? One match is the last match. But other than that, it's a whole thing. We're obligated tomorrow to get talent over in every match, and the angle over, and the storyline over. So if they're gonna play good music, we'll give them some damn good lyrics. I promise you. So it'll be good stuff. So, but I didn't know when the last we heard. At least I can speak for myself. And I think Jerry would concur. It was going to be a DQ. So, because I remember Jerry asked me, he said, what's going on in the last match? I said, I don't know. I think it's a DQ. And I didn't even know who was going to get DQ'd. I just heard it was going to be a DQ because I didn't care. I didn't care in the sense that, oh, Jerry, you didn't care about what went down? No, not that. I didn't care what the mechanics of the match were going to be. It was going to be what it was. You're going to put it on the monitor, and we're going to narrate it. We're going to give you a narrative. So I had no idea what was going to happen.
I'll say one thing. There's the guy that took credit for air and water and the birth of Jesus Christ and everything. Now he came up with, I told Vince he ought to do it. Let me tell you something real quickly. I had no idea either. It passed when we had the production meeting in Montreal the night before the pay-per-view. That's when Vince said, we're going to get the match in the ring, and boom, and thank you very much. And he folded up his book. And I went up to him, and I whispered in his ear. I said, have you got to finish? Because I'll tell you the backstory here in a second. He said, yes. I said, that's all I want to know. For 2 weeks, and once again, Shawn Michaels, I'm sorry. He was a to me. He was a everybody I liked. He was my friends. He was a the company. He was this selfish. And as we've come to find out, he told Bret Hart he would never put him over. So I don't blame Bret for not knowing what I know now. I don't blame Bret for not wanting to put him over because of what he had said. I didn't know that then. Because me and Stain and Bruce Pritchard was there also are having to sit in Vince McMahon's house day in and day out coming up on that, doing nothing but twiddling our willies while Vince is on the phone with Bret. And he's on the phone with Shawn. And he's on the phone with Bret. He's on the phone with Shawn. Okay, he's a billionaire control freak, so I couldn't just say, Vince, why the did you not take the belt off of him before you goddamn breached his contract? Which would have made some sense. Why did you make a goddamn deal? No, wait a minute. Why did you make a goddamn deal with the guy to begin with for 20 years when you weren't going to keep it for 6 months? That's another thing that would make sense. And I was frustrated because I lived in Connecticut. I was 278 pounds, eating myself into a heart attack because I was miserable there. And one day I got mad talking about one guy that's making $1 million a year, and the other guy that I liked, but he was going to make $3 million a year. And I said, God damn it, Vince, and I take credit for blame for this if I have to. I said, God damn it, Vince, If it means that much to you, double cross him. Book him with Shamrock. You'll get your fucking belt back, right? Well, I can't do that, pal. We've advertised Michaels and Bret. I said, you can't pull that fabulous moolah of Wendy Richter cinch up on a small package with Bret and Shawn, because Bret Hart will kick out of that and beat the out of Shawn Michaels right on live TV. And of course, and Russo's sitting there with those big, huge eyes going, what's a double cross? Because he don't. And hey, and I'm telling you right now, and I swear to a God I don't believe in, but I also swear on my mother's life, Vince Russo was as clueless as a goddamn putz about the whole thing. He didn't do nothing. But after that, we went on and on and on, and then finally it's going to be a DQ, and he's worked it out, or whatever the Never in a million years would I dream. And see, this is where accident breeds money. Why did Vince go out there? If he just had the referee signal for the bell, then people would have not known. But because he went out there, everybody knew something was going on. And in his mind, he thought that people would identify him as the sympathetic billionaire, that everybody would be on his side. And instead, he made himself the biggest heel of all time. But that came from his mind that somehow he's going to get the belt back, and he's going to do it in that way that blew the lid off the reality and the credibility of the business. And now everybody knows what's going on, which for better or worse is where we've been ever since then.
That was an answer, ladies and gentlemen, to that question. So I feel like we've talked about 1997 enough. We should really move on, because we got into 1998, and we...
You didn't pay the electric bill?
Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Bret the Hitman Hart!
We were actually looking for a You Still Got It.
He never lost it.
Thank you guys for letting me come out here and join in this very interesting chat. Who's starting?
Kenny, why don't you have a mic, and I'll give Bret mine.
We thought if we were going to talk about 1997 in the WWF, let's bring in the most influential guy from 1997, Bret the Hitman Hart, live here tonight. Because I think we should say this here right now, that, you know, a lot of people talk about the fact that, you know, Vince McMahon eventually got hit as a character. You know, people eventually beat him up, and people were doing storylines that maybe they were realistic. But the first guy to do those things is right here, and it's Bret Hart. And I mean, 1997, it just seemed like to be a different year for you. You were on point in every way. There was the Hart Foundation. Do you look back on that fondly now, 1997, as a year, and getting to work with your family and going across Canada and doing all that stuff?
I always thought 1997 was my most productive year in the business. You know, when you look at '97, like just the start of the year, right from Steve Austin, I wrestled at WrestleMania, going all the way through to SummerSlam. I had so many really good matches with so many people. Even the Screwjob, the match itself was a pretty good match. You know, the truth of the match, that as I remember it, is that we still had a whole another part to the match coming up. You know, we brawled mostly out on the floor before they got us in the ring, and then we just followed the storyline we'd mapped out in the dressing room. But it was a pretty good match. If the Screwjob had never happened, that would have been a really good match that we'd still be talking about today. But they did the Screwjob, so.
And I also, with 1997 and being the WWF, talk a little bit about the Hart Foundation getting together with all of you, Anvil, Bulldog, Owen, Pillman. It looked like you were having the most fun doing that stuff.
Well, we all really were friends, and we all kind of started out together, and we all had, worked in Stampede Wrestling with my father for a long time. So there was sort of a natural bond that we all had, and Brian Pillman was really like part of the family. He was a different guy, but he played football, I think, for the Calgary Stampeders, and he when I first met Brian Pillman, he was up at the Sunday dinners all the time with the rest of the family and stuff. So it's not a far reach to go, yeah, he was like family. He really was like family, and I think he got his start up in Calgary. And when we all ended up together, Neidhart was the one that was the last one to join. I always loved that idea that they had where Anvil came out and we ended up pushing Steve Austin, I think, off the stage, and he landed on the cement floor or whatever, and below the stage on one of those Raws, I think. But the way everything happened, it was really fun. I remember, I think for Owen, Davey, myself, and even Jim and Pillman, everyone was really happy with being put together, and the whole Canada-US thing was kind of, I don't know, it was an interesting sort of perspective on like how do you do this? We're going to be good guys in Canada and bad guys in the United States, but it really had a sort of a newfound kind of magic to it. It was really, people really got into it, and especially in Canada. I mean, even now, there's a lot of patriotism that comes from Canadians about me walking out with a Canadian flag and things like that, which we don't get to do that much, especially on American television. So, I mean, for me as a Canadian and as a wrestler in that whole time period with Owen and Davey, it was the most fun I ever had as a wrestler. It was so much fun going into it. The Stampede pay-per-view that we had up in Calgary, just being in Calgary and having my mom and my dad and everybody in the front row, and all the the Hart clan scattered in the crowd, and it was really a magic time for me. And when I won the title from The Undertaker in SummerSlam a few months later, I just thought it was such a great match, one of my best matches I ever had. And I thought if you asked me in August how I thought things were going, I would have thought things were going pretty good. And I always think, and maybe Jim can say otherwise, but I think there could have been so much, so many better things could have come if I could have stayed there. And I think when you really look at the Screwjob and what it did and what it was all about, it was really wrong, really bad way to do business. I was totally legally in the right to do what I was doing. In fact, people try to, they dismiss it a bit today, but Vince was the guy that told me, he goes, you can drop the belt any way you want, you can even forfeit it. Those are words that came out of Vince McMahon's mouth when he first told me that You know, it's not a case of, you know, people think sometimes that I had some kind of big up problem or attitude about losing a match in Canada, and it had nothing to do with that at all. I mean, I'd lost lots of matches in Canada. You know, it just was, when I look at it, I think it was, maybe I can be, Jim might know better, but I think it was Triple H was the guy that kind of spearheaded the screw job. It was not a very good idea. I think it set a bad example for the company, for wrestlers down the road. Like, you know, when you see things happening in wrestling today, I guess like Brock Lesnar and John Cena, and you know, they don't have to worry about being screwed in the ring, I don't think, because I think they've learned now that it was a pretty stupid way to do business, and I just wish that I hadn't been the guy that they did it on.
I do want to say one thing. There's been the rumor or the speculation or whatever that everybody said, oh, Vince had to do this because Bret was going to show up the next night on Nitro with the belt. And that's there. That's a good word to describe it. Because number one, you couldn't take the belt. That was a legal precedent had been set with Flair. Number two, Bret had given his word, and Vince actually believed that. Vince said, I believe that Bret will keep his word that he would not show up on the TV, even if you could. Where the guy he didn't trust was Bischoff, because he thought that Bischoff, who'd already had Medusa dump the women's belt in the garbage can and all the other things, he thought that Bischoff would come out and say, I've signed the WWF champion. Even though he was the top star of the WWF, they couldn't keep him because I wanted him. That's what Vince was scared of, Bischoff saying that, which would have been, in his mind, almost the same thing. But people have said, oh, they were afraid Bret was going to come out. Not only did Vince not even believe that, but also we knew you wouldn't have done that. I just want to say that right now.
You know, I had no intentions. I didn't even want to leave the company. I remember telling Vince for 2 or 3 months going into the Survivor Series, like, because they were trying to squeeze me out of my contract. They wanted me to take a cut in pay or adjust my salary. So they said they couldn't pay it anymore. But I mean, when you really look at the facts, you know, and if you, I don't know if anybody out there has read my book, but you know, Vince McMahon, he had told me that I could forfeit the belt, I could leave any way I wanted. He basically told me that the company was doing so badly that they were going to downsize the company and they were going to become a Northeast promotion. They were going to only work in the big cities in the East Coast. They were going to become a more regional. Basically, he was saying he couldn't fight Ted Turner anymore. And then he had suggested to me that they couldn't pay me anymore and that they would have to cut my contract down or do another one, and that I'd be free to go to WCW if I wanted. And maybe it wasn't too late for me to go and get the same deal that Eric Bischoff had offered me a half year before. So I kind of, I reluctantly sort of reached out to WCW to see if they were interested in me still, and turned out that they were interested in me and were going to pay me even more than they were originally to come work for them. And I think somehow that, the thought that, yeah, I can get my deal with WCW, it's still there. I think that must have bothered Vince that maybe that I could still get that deal. So the wheel started rolling, and I remember telling Vince over and over, I said, I don't want to leave this company. I've been with this company from the beginning. I think I was one of the, at that time, I was probably one of the longest, I had the longest career there of any of the wrestlers. Maybe me and, I don't even think Mr. Fuji was around anymore. Me and Finkel, yeah. But so I had a lot of years and a lot of loyalty, and I loved the company. I worked from the very bottom to get to the very top. I took a lot of pride in everything that Vince did for me and what the company did for me. And I had no illusions about WCW. I knew that Eric Bischoff was a total idiot, and I knew that every wrestler that ever came from WCW, from Steve Austin, and they always had the most horrific stories to tell about what what a screwed up place WCW was. And so even Owen, my brother Owen had been there, and I remember him saying, "You don't want to go there." And I was like, "I know I don't want to go there, but there's only two choices here. You know, you can go A or B, and I'm getting pushed out of A, so I gotta see what I can do with these other guys." But yeah, I had a lot of great matches that year, and I think that Jim might remember. I remember I flew down to Connecticut to negotiate a contract that because my contract had expired while I had been off, and I flew down, and I had thought about it a lot on the plane about what I was going to do, and I had come down, and I remember I met with Jim and Vince, and we talked about signing a contract, and at the time I kind of I said I don't really want to sign a contract yet because I'm not sure when I want to come back, because I was trying to sort of launch a film career at the time. But I remember we talked about. My understanding was when I left that meeting that day was that I was going to come back, and that I was going to have a bit of a chip on my shoulder towards Sean, and I was going to start ragging on him for not being a good role model, and that because I remember watching him on TV, and sometimes he'd pull his pants down and show his pubes and all that, and I thought, being the so-called hero babyface of the company, that's not a good way to present yourself. I just remember sort of making note in my head, and the more I watched Sean doing stuff like that, where he'd pull his pants down and get the kids dancing and all that in the ring, I remember going, it'd be easy for me as a babyface to take exception to what Sean doing. But I thought, really what it was is a good chance for me to make a storyline here with Sean where, I've lost the title to him at WrestleMania 12, and I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I lost, and the way the whole thing was set up was perfect for me to come back with a bit of an attitude about Sean. And what I had wanted to do was work a storyline with Sean where I wrestled him at WrestleMania. We would have had a really good match, because Sean was a great wrestler, one of the best I ever worked with, and probably the best I ever worked with in a lot of ways. And I had an idea where I was gonna, like maybe if you can visualize, like, it's like 35-minute match. Me and Sean have, tore the house down with a really great match, and the place is going crazy. Like, it's basically a duplicate of the Iron Man match, sort of all over again, but we wouldn't go the full hour again. But I wanted to do a thing where Sean was stomping his foot, getting ready to give me that big kick, and I'm in trouble. Like, I'm pulling myself up from the ropes from the other side of the ring, and Sean goes to give me that big kick as I sort of stagger over to him, just like at the Iron Man match. And except for this time, I would take Sean's foot and catch it in the air and bring him to the ground and put some kind of a shoot hold on his foot and break his foot right in the middle of the ring. And then I wanted Sean to tap out like they do in UFC, where it's like, when you break somebody's arm, they tap out pretty fast, and everyone jumps in, and it's a very serious kind of thing. And I wanted to break Sean's foot, and then they'd hand me the belt and all that, and I would walk over and stand over top of him and go, "F you." And I thought that that would give Sean the sympathy. Like, I come back and I beat him, really strongly with a really harsh finish like that. He would have come back a few months later, and we would have wrestled again for maybe next year. WrestleMania would be the third match that we have, or SummerSlam, or whenever we'd have the third match we had, and then we would have a match where I dropped the title to him right in the middle and give him the big push for, like, where he'd be the champion for a long time. But I thought it was a good way to get sympathy. I also thought that Sean has those motorcycle boots that you could kind of make those boots, like gimmick them or take them to a prop guy that would sort of make that boot sort of click like you could actually twist the boot where it's sort of like a socket wrench or something like that, where it locks in place in a funny position. So when I grabbed Sean's foot, he could pull his foot, like his sock, a little ways out of the boot so it's in the calf area. And then I would take that boot and I'd just snap it all the way around and it would lock in a position. And it would just be lying in the ring with the boot in a really funny position where you go, geez, his foot looks broken. And I thought it would have been...
actually just done it for real.
Hindsight, you know, but anyway, I thought stuff like that. I remember I went away from that meeting, and I think that was in August, and it was like a good meeting, and I felt really good. It was kind of like it was something that we were going to probably do down the road, and Vince seemed to like the idea, and Jim liked it. And I remember that day I got on the airplane, I was flying through Dallas, and lo and behold, Shawn Michaels is on the exact same flight with me, and he's sitting right beside me. And he was doing a photo shoot or something in Connecticut at the same time. But I remember I sat with Sean in the seats on the airplane, and I said, Sean, I just talked to everybody about it, and I told him what was going on, and I told him my idea about the boot and everything. And you could see the color drain out of his face. I mean, he just hated that idea. And I thought, you know, like, this is a really good idea that could be really fun to do. And we could get lots of mileage out of it. And we could wrestle each other for the next 5, 6, 7 years here with all kinds of great storylines and great history of maybe go back and forth the belt lots of times. And but I remember Sean did not like that idea. And I remember trying to tell him, I said, you know, the thing about that we got here is we got everybody in the dressing room. We had most of the people in the office. But everybody thinks we hate each other. There's a big problem here. I said, I don't have any problem with you. It's all, and the things I'm going to, like the way I would build my story or this storyline would be, I would have to do it on a kind of try to make it seem like a shoot. So I'm going to come out and be really kind of like I said, with a chip on my shoulder and kind of say a lot of things about you that as a baby face that you're not a role model. I said, but, you know, I think that the key here is that everybody thinks we really have a lot of tension, and that is so hard to find in wrestling when you've got two guys that have a storyline where everyone thinks they hate each other. When you know, like Steve Austin and me had the same storyline that me and Sean had, except for the difference was that Sean took everything serious and was offended by everything I said, and Steve understood that it was somebody trying to do business with him and trying to make money with him. And that's why I look back today and I have a lot of regret about what happened, mostly because I think if I'd stayed, we would have had some awesome matches. And the best stuff was yet to come, never happened. The stuff I could have done with Steve Austin and then in the next year or two after I got screwed over and never happened. Never got to work with Undertaker, never happened. A lot of guys that were coming up like Rock. I mean, I would love to have worked with Rock. I had a lot to do with helping him and being a supporter of his when the first day he started there. You know, there was a lot of guys that like Edge, and I could just name all kinds of guys I would love to have worked with. And I wouldn't have got kicked in the head by Goldberg. So.
As we sort of wind down here, the last slide I'm going to bring up here kind of ties everything together. It was you'd left WWF, and then in January of 1998, there was the confrontation on Raw with Steve Austin and Mike Tyson. But JR, I want to ask you, how important was the rivalry that Bret and Steve Austin had to get Steve Austin to that point where he was able to stand in a ring with Mike Tyson, one of the biggest guys in entertainment or sports, and have that moment?
Easiest way to answer that question is, and I think I probably know Austin as good as anybody in the room, and he'll tell you, I think, the same thing. I know he'll tell you the same thing. We've talked about it. Steve Austin would not be Stone Cold if it wasn't for Bret Hart. In a story. Because what happened, we talked about new and reinventing, and Steve was being reinvented. I remember one time telling him, doing commentary, you could feel it. And if you've been out there as tenured as I was on that show and in that company, you could feel certain things. If you had any instincts and still had your passion about it, you could tell he was going to be a giant baby face. Now, did we know he'd be as big as he was? I can't say that for me. I'd like to be able to say, oh, yeah, I do. No. I couldn't. But we thought he was going to be really big. He didn't want to be a baby face. He loved being a heel. He loved working their rugged style until I got him off the side one day and we talked about royalties. And, well, he had never been in a situation working in Tennessee, working in world class, working at WCW, where royalties were even an issue, non-issue. That was one of the great things about WWE. It's still there today, is that they have a systematic marketing plan where the talents get paid quarterly royalties. And some of that royalty money can be really life-changing. So I knew what Hogan had made royalty-wise and other big stars, Savage, and so forth. I didn't give Steve the numbers. I said, but do you realize that you can make $500,000 a quarter selling T-shirts? And everything stopped. You could almost hear the wheels, the gears clicking, going around. Ironically, I said, you don't have to change your style. You don't retreat anyway. You don't even work like a heel, which pissed him off. How can you expect to work like a heel when you never retreat? You don't cheat. You don't lie. You don't deny. All you do, you're just a badass. What about being a badass as a heel? Nothing. Well, so I critiqued his work, and he wasn't overwhelmed with my critique, but nonetheless, I believed it to be accurate. I said, so you don't have to change your style. Wrestle just like you're wrestling, but you'll just be on a different side of the fence, wear a different jersey, different team. And so, lo and behold, on down the road, back to the royalty question, he kind of got hot. He had one quarter where he made over $1 million in one quarter in 3 months of work, just selling gimmicks. They ain't counting payroll money, pay-per-view or live events or whatever. He got to where he needed to be. So, but the only way Steve would have been there was to be given the classic rub. And he had to be in the ring with somebody that people had great respect and confidence in, that they believed in. And Bret made sure that when he worked with Steve, that Steve was elevated and shined and made better. And that's what we don't see a lot of that today, because there are too many fragile egos, too many guys that really can't work. I was talking to Corny earlier today about the business today a little bit. A couple of observations. There's so many young guys that work in WWE, for example. There's other companies too. New Japan's got a ton of them. Ring of Honor's got some of them. I don't know how the guys make any money in TNA, but that's another issue. But bottom line is this. You got a bunch of guys that are making way above six figures, way fat six figures in WWE that have never sold out a house. They've never set the market on fire on their gimmicks. They're at the right place at the right time. It reminds me of Coach Barry Switzer, my friend at Oklahoma University, said, yeah, that guy. I said, what about this guy's kid? He said, oh, well, he was born on third base and woke up and thought he hit a triple. Meaning, he just had to be there.
I don't know whether they get baseball.
Oh, probably not. I'm sorry.
Good analogy.
Sorry. Point being is that a lot of guys hadn't earned it. There's nobody there to give a rub to. They're uncomfortable giving their best to make somebody else look better than them. Bret had no issue doing that, and I will say it the last time, if Bret Hart had not come along when he did to work with Steve, I doubt very seriously that Austin could have gotten as big as he was, because that launched him, and he took the ball and ran with it.